Welcome to the next section, which is entitled RecyclerViews Super Powered List. Back to the previous section, app, which I called the Hungry Developer. We had an example of a list in that app. So if I just show you in the app, the Hungry Developer, and I go into one of the courses, I'll go to main courses. This is a list. We use Android's simple list view widget, and we gave it an array of things, whether that was an array of strings or an array of our dish class, and the list view took care of the layout for each of those items. But if we look at this, it's very, very basic, just a simple text view. Now if I just go back to the home screen, in mobile development, the ability to make beautiful looking lists is absolutely integral to many, if not most of the apps that you will have seen out there. For example, if I go to the YouTube app now, and we scroll up and down, this may look quite complex and that there's quite a lot going on, but if we analyse this, all we're really seeing is a picture with a bit of time in the bottom right, then a bold text view with an icon to the left, and then a regular font subtext view beneath it, and then some three dots. And this item layout is repeated over and over again. Picture, two text views, an icon. If you think to some of those major apps like Twitter, Instagram, and even your Gmail inbox, all you're really seeing there is repeating items, whether that's tweets or pictures or quite simply emails in your inbox. So this ability to make a complicated layout for each item, to lay out each item however we want, and then to have the list take care of rendering that, this is an absolutely key skill in making beautiful looking Android apps. Now it is possible using that list view that we used in the last section to make a custom layout and make a slightly more complicated adapter to fill the layout with whatever we need, whether that's a picture or some text. However, the Recycler view is a more advanced and more capable and high performing version of the list view, and we're going to see why in detail later on in the section. With the way that the individual items, like you see in the YouTube list here, how each item's views are created and then used again as we scroll up and down. There may be hundreds if not thousands of potential items in the YouTube app, and it would not be a very good thing for performance for the app to fill all the pictures and text and icons and everything for all the dozens or hundreds of items that are not currently showing on the screen. In fact, you can only really see 2 or 3 at a time at most. Now both the Recycler view and the list view do have the behaviour where they can only show 3 or 4 items at a time and then rebuild them as they come in and out of focus. But the difference with the Recycler view is rather than making a fresh item, a fresh image view, a fresh text view for every single item that we scroll up and down, as the name suggests, it recycles previous views. So if that sounds complicated, thinking to our YouTube app here, this may only need 3 or 4 image views at a time, because that's all we can see on the screen. And rather than making a brand new one for every single individual item, it will simply remove the picture from one previous item and swap that picture for a new item. So it's only ever really using 3 or 4 image views, and then it's just swapping the pictures, as opposed to having dozens or hundreds of image views. Okay? So from a performance point of view, it's a lot easier for this list to recycle the same 3 or 4 image views and just swap the pictures than it is for it to keep making image view after image view after image view. That's a subtle difference. If it sounds complicated right now, don't worry, we'll look at some of the Android documentation on this later on so we can see in more detail. But all you need to know is that a Recycler view is a super powered list view that has better performance and gives us more flexibility to do some amazing things with the way that we lay our list out. Now if I go to the home screen, I'm going to show you the app that we're going to be building in this section. Okay, so we're going to be making an app which is going to be your own personal portfolio. It's going to be a list like this with individual items, which is a card view with an icon, some bold text for a title and a subtext. And it's going to be an ever-growing list of all the things you've made during this course, right from the Getting Started app through to the Hungry Developer. And it'll give us an excellent chance to practice making beautiful lists with a custom. The first thing we need to do is make a new project for this section. So close the previous project down if it's currently open and start a new project. Then check activity. Now for the name, call this whatever you would like. This is going to be the portfolio of all the projects that you've done during this course and any other ones you might want to add in the future. So something that reflects that. I'm going to put simply Finn's Android project. Okay, you can call yours whatever you want. Feel free to put your name in it or call it something different if you would like. Okay, so package name, I'm going to leave that with my domain. I might want to publish this one day or at least show it on my website. So I don't have com.example in there. Okay, save location, that's fine. And then language leaving as Java for now. Now, minimum SDK. Previously we'd left this as the default 4.1. This is the point now where I'd like you to change this to what I think is the more sensible default. If you can change this to API 21, which was Android Lollipop. When we start to develop our list item, we're going to use relative layout, which we've used before, but we're going to start to use an attribute when using our relative layout in the XML, and it's an attribute which isn't available prior to Lollipop. And so it will come up with a warning as we start to design it. By setting our minimum SDK, our minimum software developer kit to Lollipop or later, it means we're not going to run into some problems by using attributes that weren't available before then. Android 5, or Lollipop, is the point where they introduced material design, which you may or may not have heard of. But material design was a major leap forward in terms of user interface, some nice design touches, and having things in different layers, and that sort of paper-like display that became really, really popular. I recommend for pretty much all projects, setting the minimum SDK to be API 21, which was Lollipop. And from this point in the course forwards, I will always be ensuring that the minimum SDK is API 21. As you can see, it still runs on 94% of devices, which is quite a lot. We lose a few worldwide, much in terms of capabilities, and it prevents us having to do a lot of ugly hacks to make things packaging SDK. Okay, there's no more activity, so that's finished setting up. So we've got our new project for this section, and the very next thing we want to be doing whenever we make a new project is adding any dependencies. If you remember from the previous section, a dependency is when we tell Android Studio there's some other library that isn't available by default when we make a new project, and we tell Android Studio to go and get those files to make them available to us. So do you remember which file we go to add new dependencies? So the answer is our build files, build.gradle. So on the left, changing this to project, and open the folder, And remember, it is not the project build.gradle file, it's the one inside our app. So open the app folder, and it's this file here that we want. So go ahead and open that. And then we're here in our build.gradle files. We ignore the plugin, and we can ignore the whole Android block, and we scroll down to dependencies. Again, the test ones don't really matter for now until we start writing tests, and the top one doesn't really matter because we don't have any local libraries. So the ones we want to get from the internet to download are these ones here. So the two libraries we need is the one for RecyclerView, our new special superpowered list, and then CardView again. If you remember in the last section, it was CardView that we needed because you don't get this by default. So RecyclerView and CardView are not available in the default Android app compat library. I'm going to head over to my browser now. Okay, and the way that I usually find the line we need to type, I type the word Android, and I'll type the name of the library. So let's start with CardView again first, and then dependency. And if you want to be double safe to make sure you get that Android X thing, you can actually add the Android X as Google is suggesting. So that's a pretty good way to get the latest library. Okay, this one looks good, Android X, yes, CardView. And scroll down, and I can see the line there. Remembering we don't need a dependency block because we already have the block. We just need this line here. So I'm going to triple click that and copy. I'm going to go back to Android Studio. I'm going to put that underneath these lines there. And then the other library we need is the recycler view, because we don't get the recycler view by default in our app compat library. We do get the list view, but not the recycler view. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Google, and I'm just going to change the word card view for recycler view, all as one. Okay, search. Top one looks good, Android X, so I'm going to click that. And okay, we've got a couple of lines here, recycler view and recycler view dash selection. But if we look at the second one, that's for control over item selection for both touch and mouse driven selection. We're not too concerned about making it compatible for using a mouse on our touchscreen devices. So you can ignore this one, and we'll go for the top one. Android X.recyclerview : recyclerview version 1.1.0. Triple click, copy, back to Android Studio, and underneath our card view, just paste that. And we can remove some of those line breaks. So those are our two lines that we need there. And we're getting prompted by Gradle to sync our changes, which is the same thing as clicking the elephant, which basically tells Android Studio to go ahead, read this Gradle file, this build file, and take any action as needed, which in this case involves going on the internet, finding these libraries, and downloading them. So if you remember, I said in the last section that these dependencies are our app's ingredients. This is like our app's shopping list. So let's click sync now. Now that we have the recycler view and the card view added as dependencies, we can start using it. So the first thing we need to do is add the recycler view, which is going to be our list, to the main layout. So at the top, click on activity_main, and we can delete all of the default constraint layout code. On the home screen, there's only going to be the recycler view, and then it'll be the individual items, which will then start to fill the screen. So delete everything apart from the XML declaration, and then do a new tag, and with a capital R, type the word recycler, and with a capital V, view, and then autocomplete. There won't be anything additional inside the recycler view. The individual items will happen in code, so we can do a self-closing tag like that. And if we make a couple of line breaks, we're getting a warning because we need width and height as usual. So I'm going to type the word height, H-E-I-G-H, then autocomplete. And I will do match parent because I want the list to fill the screen. And the same for the layout width, match parent. And I'm going to do Control-Alt-L to auto-format that. Okay, and if I go to the split view, you may or may not be able to see the blue border that suggests that this recycler view is filling the screen, even though the example 10 items that they're showing only takes up this much space. The actual recycler view is as big as the screen. Okay, we can go back to code view for the time being. There's one more thing we need to add to this for the recycler view to work, and that's called a layout manager. The recycler view, being more powerful or more capable than the list view of the last section, is able to lay out your items not just on top of each other, like a vertical linear layout, but it can show them side by side, or even in a grid, and with items of different sizes and different heights. And the ability to lay things out in these different ways is controlled by a layout manager. And fortunately for us, it is just one attribute that we add to the recycler view that will handle this. So underneath the height and width, we can make a new line, and just start typing the word layout, and then capital M for manager. And when you see the item there, autocomplete that. We get given three options here: linear layout manager, grid layout manager, and staggered grid layout manager. For now, in this section, we're just going to lay the items vertically on top of each other like the previous section. So linear layout manager is absolutely fine for this. So you can select that one and then autocomplete. Okay, and I'm just going to do a Control-Alt-L or Command-Option-L to auto-format this. Okay, now there's one subtle thing that's worth pointing out here. We now have this layout manager in a different namespace. It's not Android : layout manager, it's app : layout manager. And if you see at the top, we now have two XML namespaces: XML NS Android, XML namespace app. Okay, you don't need to worry about these, as Android Studio will know which namespace to get the attribute from. But just to explain what's going on here, anything that comes default with Android in the Android app compat libraries, or your standard widgets and views, pretty much their attributes will be coming from the Android namespace. This is the standard Android attributes. Anything additional, whether that's from a new library, like our new recycler view library, or card view, or perhaps a custom view that we might even make ourselves, anything custom comes from this app namespace. So Android with this URL is your Android attributes, and then by convention it's called app, although we can call it cheese if we wanted to, but by convention the one called app comes from this URL. Again, don't worry about this if this is Android and bring you new attribute and for now. So let's move on. So we have our recycler view in our main activity layout. So the next thing we need to do is actually build the individual item layout in our list. So this is going to be the layout that we give to the recycler view, which will be for each individual project. Okay, so this is the fun part.
So to make a new layout, we first need to go to the layout folder in our project panel. So from the top, it's our app source files, the main source files, and it's a resource. And we have the layout folder there. We can go ahead and open this to see the activity_main, but actually all we need to do is right click on the layout folder and click new layout resource file. So pretty much every file, all of the XML and pictures that sit within the resource folder on the left, they do all need to be lowercase and only with underscores separating the words. It's known as snake case, which is the common way of referring to lowercase with underscores. So it has to be snake case. In terms of what we name it, we can call it whatever we wanted. We could say my fun project item layout. We could do that. I like to go with best practices and Google recommended conventions. And the convention is to start with the type of thing it is. So if it's an activity, then start with the word activity, like in the last section, activity_starters, activity_desserts. And then after the type of thing that it is, that's an activity or an item, or later on a fragment, after the type of thing, then the description of what it is. So in this case, the type of thing is an item, an individual item for our RecyclerView. So we'll start with the word item, then the underscore, and then it's project. It's an individual project item, and we start with the category first. And for the root element, which has constraint layout, we can click this, we can delete everything there, and the root element of our item is going to be our card view that we can now use because we have it as a dependency. So start typing the word card view with a capital C. Okay, and as soon as you get the autocomplete, go ahead and press enter, and then press OK. Good, so I'm in a brand new item project layout file. Yours may be in design mode, and if it is in design, change over to split. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close down the project pane for the rest of this tutorial. So I've got a lot of space to work with, and feel free to go ahead and drag over the split thing just so it has enough room for the design. Good, okay. So I'm in my card view now, and this time the card view is going to have contents, so I'm happy to have my opening tag and my closing tag. I'm going to make a few extra line breaks to see what I'm doing. And I'm actually going to do an auto format straight away because I don't like the way that Android Studio does this with these two attributes, width and height on the same line. So Control-Alt-L, Command-Option-L, and that looks nice and tidy. The topmost layer will be a card view. Now, if you remember from the last section, card view, while it is a container, it is a view group. It's not a very flexible one. We can't actually move things and lay out things inside the card view that well as it is. So what we want to do is add one of our better view groups, our better containers inside it, whether that's linear layout or relative layout, the two that we know so far. So I'm going to do a relative layout inside this card view to give us more practice, because I think we've only used relative layout once before. So the next thing we want to do is do another element. So start a tag, capital R for relative, and then capital L, and then autocomplete. Now we will make this match parent. We'll have it as wide as the screen. That's fine. But we will set the height to wrap content. We want it to wrap around to be as big as the things inside it. So wrap content for the height. And do a normal right arrow, so we get our normal closing tag, and do some line breaks. And we are going to have to go up to the card view and also change the layout height to wrap content. If we leave the top level card view to match parent, then what you'd have is, you'd have your list, and one item would fill the screen. We wouldn't be able to see multiple items, we just have one item that was as big as the screen. So we definitely want this to be wrap content, okay? So that's wrap content for height, that's wrap content for height, and now we can start playing around inside our relative layout and start designing our individual items. So the first thing we're going to need is an image view, a picture on the left side of our individual items. So let's go ahead and make an image view. Okay, and we will set the width to be exactly 80 dp. dp standing for density independent pixels, so it'll be the same size no matter how high resolution or low resolution phone we have. So 80 density independent pixels wide and 80 high. Okay, we're going to keep going. We're going to go ahead and add an ID straight away. We want to be adding IDs not only for everything in the layout we want to configure in our code, which will be the picture and the text, but we also need IDs because we're working with relative layout. We're going to lay these things out relative to each other. So we need the ID to be able to identify the items. So the ID will be, don't forget to autocomplete that plus ID, image underscore view underscore, and this will be our project icon. Okay, see, I'm using the same format, all lowercase with underscores, snake case. And I'm starting by describing the type of thing first, image view, and then what it is afterwards. I've been doing this all course, but now we're getting better. I want to really hammer home this popular convention that a lot of Android developers like to use. For now, we will just do a self-closing tag. Okay, so we haven't given this image view source, we haven't given it the picture yet, but that's okay. When I actually click it, I can see my blue rectangle in the design view. Now if we look at this, we probably want to add some margins, but what we'll do is we'll get all the things we need on the screen first, and then we'll tweak the layout afterwards. So the next thing we need is a text view with a bold text for the app name. So just make a text view. We'll make it match the parent, so we'll make it fill the width. We're going to position it in a moment to the right of the image view, so that's fine. And the height, as usual for most of our text views, wrap content will be fine. Okay. And just so we can see what's going on in the layout, I'm going to give this some default text. So we'll type the word text and autocomplete, Android code on text, and we'll just say the app title. So we look to the right, we can see it there. So now we want to actually position this to the right of our image view. And because we're working inside a relative layout, we have the ability to say underneath, above, left and right, okay? So one way we could do it is layout to right of. You'll see that, to the right of. Okay, I can do that, and I can give it the ID of the image view. I can start typing image view and autocomplete. And if we look to the right, you can see it's moved to the right of our image view, okay? Ignore the warning for the text. That's telling us we should really put these words somewhere else. And we've been getting this warning all course so far, and we'll talk about moving the actual words somewhere better very soon. But this warning we do want to pay attention to. Consider replacing to the right of with to the end of, to better support right to left layouts. Now, those of us English-speaking languages and many Western languages, we're used to seeing the start of our sentences, the start of our words on the left side of the screen. But there are some languages, like Arabic, for example, and others, where their words start from the right of the screen. So the words read from right to left. So rather than saying to the right of, we say to the end of. So layout to the end of. And this is really clever because what this will do is, in phones which have a language set to things like English, where things are left to right, it will put it the end to the right side. But in other phones where they set the language to, for example, Arabic, where it reads from right to left, well, that will put the text to the left of. Okay, so this is a feature that became standard as of Android version 21. So if you're using Jelly Bean or the previous version of Android and we hadn't changed that minimum project version, you'd be getting a warning saying that didn't know anything about to the end of to the start of. But from Lollipop onwards, then this was the way to do things. So that's one example of why it's good to have a better minimum project level. So this will work for both left to right and right to left, which is fantastic. Okay, so we'll continue now. We need to add an ID to this. We're going to be changing the text later, and we also want to lay out the other text view. So let's call it text_view_project title. And then we'll do another text view underneath. Text view, match parent will be fine. Wrap content for the height. We'll give this some text saying this will be our description of the project. Okay, if you look at the layout, it's horribly overlapping because we haven't told it where to go yet. So we need to do two things. We need to make it to the end of the picture again, so layout to the end of the picture, image view, project icon. And now we want to say underneath the other text view. So let's do layout below, and layout below the title. And if we look to the right, that appears to be a little bit better. Okay, and we'll just do a self-closing tag. So we have our three items that we need, our image view, our two text views. The next thing that will be good to do will be to give them a bit of padding, a bit of margin. Now it's kind of hard to see what's going on with the image view, so we should give it some sort of picture, just as a template. So let's type src, and if we type drawable, that will give us a few pictures that come by default with our new project. So if we do launcher background, that will actually be the background of our app icon, and later on we'll learn how to change app icons. But for now, just doing this launcher background and selecting that gives us a pretty boring looking green square, but at least we can see what we're doing, and we can start to apply some margins and make things look a bit nicer. So let's give the image itself margin. So by giving the image view layout margin, make sure it's on margin and not margin top or bottom, this will put space all around this image view. So let's do a multiple of 4, let's do 12 dp. And if you look to the right, straight away we can see there's 12 density independent pixels worth of space around the whole image view, so that already looks better. So now we've given the image view 12 dp of margin, we can see the pictures come down a bit, but the two text views, they're kind of stuck to the top of the layout, because by default in our relative layout, all of the views will be at the very top and the very left, or the very start I should say, until we tell them otherwise. So we've told this text view to be to the end of, or to the right of our picture, but we haven't said anything about the height. Now there's all kinds of properties that we have access to because we're inside this relative layout. And there's a useful one which will make this exactly in line with the image view, and this is called layout align top. So by doing layout align top and giving the ID of our image view, autocomplete, you can see now that the top of the text view is exactly in line. So if I was to give this more margin, view, autocomplete, you can see now that the top of the text view is exactly in line. So if I was to give this more margin, like that, well, the top of the picture would come down with it, which is exactly what we want. Okay, just going to undo that. So 12 dp. So we've aligned the text view to the top of our image view. The image view has 12 dp. That also gives it nice space for both the text views. So in my opinion, the only other margin thing we need to do is give the description a bit of space from the text view above it. So now, rather than doing layout margin, which will put it on all sides, which would look a bit weird, we can actually be specific and say layout margin top autocomplete. And we'll give it something small, like 4 density independent pixels, 4 dp. If I just click off, and looking to the right, that looks pretty good to me. So we have our image view, our two text views, they've all got IDs. Actually, no, they don't. We're missing an ID from the description, so let's add that right now. ID text underscore view underscore project underscore description. They now all have IDs. If we look at this, it doesn't look that pretty right now. We haven't got the nice rounded corners on the card view itself, the white thing, or the image view, so we can look at adding that later. We haven't done anything fancy with our font family or the color just yet, but I'll save that for another tutorial. It won't be anywhere near as long as this one, and we can put the icing on the cake near the end. We now have everything that we need to go on and start to apply this to our recycler view. There's one final thing that I will do though, and I will do the auto format Control-Alt-L, Command-Option-L, because in doing this, it moves all of the IDs to the top, which makes things a lot easier to see. So with the card view, relative layout, and our three views, the image view, text view, and text view, we now have everything that we need to start working on the code for our recycler view. Fantastic.